Hi, I'm Rob Price, and I'm talking to some inspirational leaders of some of the leading AI and Gen AI businesses in the world. Welcome to Futurise.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks first of all, Rob, for having me on your podcast. So my name is Louis. I'm the founder and CEO of Fingreen AI, and basically, we like to say that we're the first AI native ESG reporting solution that exists. Basically, what we do is we assess what is the environmental impact of small companies, right? And that's pretty tough because these small companies, they don't have the time, they don't have the resources to complete super long and complicated ESG questionnaires. So our whole goal is how can we use AI and technology more broadly to kind of make that a simple and transparent experience.
And tell me a bit more about how you got into that as an idea. What was your background that made you think, hey, that's an opportunity in the market that's right for me?
Yeah, so I'm actually one of the youngest of the company, but I created it out of school. I went to school in the US and in France. And so basically, Fingreen, to start with, was not at all what we're doing today. We had a couple of pivots, just like any good startup. It actually started as kind of a B2C investment company, right? Making young people invest in sustainable companies, and it kind of opened up the whole door of what does sustainability mean for each company, each industry. This is how we got introduced to something called the European taxonomy, which is for the first time kind of in history a common dictionary of exactly that. What is sustainability for each industry, for each company almost. And so we pivoted because investment B2C is actually very hard in France. A lot of like regulation, costs a lot of money, lots of time. We said, hey, like we saw the European Green Deal, SFDR, CSRD, all of these brand new kind of regulatory obligations. And we decided to go and help first financial actors, but very quickly all types of company be compliant, but also generate also kind of non-regulatory ESG reporting.
I'm fascinated by the focus on the SME space as well, because I mean it's an old statistic, but I think certainly kind of 3, 4 years ago, if I looked at the UK, the UK SMEs were forecast to cover about 6%, something of that order of the emissions in the UK. So SME and focus on SME business is important, but of course they're not always going to be in a position where they've got data to hand or an understanding of what they can do to improve that. So it'd be fascinating to understand how they're engaging with you. And in a sense, if they're listening now, what's the compelling reason for them to get in touch?
Yeah, so that's an interesting stat. I didn't know that one for the UK. One that I really like is to say that basically 99% of all companies are non-listed companies, right? And we're kind of forgetting about them because we only kind of tackle big public companies when it comes to environmental measures. So our whole thing is how can we lower the barrier for any company in the world, right? You can be a bakery, you can be a startup, but we also work with like pre-IPO companies, so quite a wide range. How can we make your environmental assessment as easy, automated, precise, transparent as possible, right? And so if you go look, so I would tell them to go look at our website, but you look at something like, for example, the B Corp label, right? This is something that lasts maybe 6 months to do, cost 50K, and it's a private label. That's the crazy part, right? It's a private company. We just released kind of our VSME SME product based on a brand new European standard. This is basically 30 metrics, will cost you 700 euro per year to do, entirely self-service, and it's actually a publicly internationally recognized. Um, it's not really a label, but it's based out of the EU. It's still voluntary today. It soon will be mandatory. But so this is exactly what we're trying to do, right? You don't need to do, especially small companies, right? They don't have this time of money and time to spend getting B Corp or other private labels, but that doesn't mean they should be excluded from kind of this whole ecological transition. So that's exactly what we're trying to do with Fingreen, obviously using AI, but also using technology, digitalization, and automation more broadly.
And are you doing that in France or across Europe or more broadly?
So we started in France. Now we're pretty much all around Europe, like in Greece, Portugal, Romania, Germany, like all of these countries have the same regulatory obligations. And it's funny because we actually got almost more traction outside of France from like mid-sized companies, mid-sized consulting cabinets that need to do all of that and need to accompany their clients, but don't have a tool, or if a tool exists, it's way too expensive. You have consulting fees above it. So yeah, it's kind of funny. So we're mainly in Europe, and we're starting to be a little bit in the Middle East and Asia. And the UK actually has the ISSB coming soon next year, which is kind of the twin brother of the IFRS, which are these international accounting norms. So yeah, very soon I hope we'll be almost all over the world. Obviously, some continents like Africa, South America are less advanced on these ESG considerations. Europe is obviously kind of the pioneer in that space. But yeah, we're already kind of outside of France.
Fantastic. So I know that people might be thinking at this point, well, you've mentioned AI a few times, but we haven't really
Yeah.
got heads around how it's being used. So could you just expand on that a bit more for people listening? How are you using AI? And of course, AI itself means lots of things, AI, machine learning, generative AI. So what aspects are you particularly taking advantage of?
Yeah, exactly. I always get asked like, so where do you use AI, right? The answer is everywhere, basically. And we're kind of one of the latest ESG reporting startup that has been created, which is a gift and a curse, right? A gift because we're the first AI native platform. Our whole business model is very different from our competitors that have more kind of an old school consultancy kind of hidden with a tech solution. And a curse, obviously, because we have some time that, yeah, they have a bit of advance, right? Better funded, been there for a bit more time. So to answer your question very precisely, I'll give you just a few examples of how we use AI. In our case, we're building out of existing LLMs. We don't have the resources to create our own. Today, we're using Mistral AI. We tried OpenAI, also Gemini, but we wanted to have ideally a French open source one, even though last week they kind of announced new partnerships with Microsoft, what's going to be the future of that. But yeah, in our case, we'll have to build on an existing one. So a couple of examples, it can range from like digitizing super complex legal documents and ESG frameworks, customer support for a small private company. So it's our Gaia AI assistant, the equivalent of having 1,000 ESG consultants that understand exactly what your company does, that you're here to fill in data, that you don't necessarily have the knowledge or the time to do that. It's also useful for extracting data, especially from unstructured sources. So you can drop down a PDF, an Excel, a Word, a PowerPoint presentation, and our AI will automatically understand things such as value chain items or what stakeholders are relevant to you. And all the way to the very, very end of the process with automation of reporting, right? It's a pain. Okay, you've collected that data, but now how do you kind of format it into both regulatory and non-regulatory templates? So there's not one answer and not one type of AI. We really, really try and push to use it at every single step and automate as much as possible without kind of, leaving behind accuracy, transparency. There's a lot of checks. Our whole methodology is open source, so we don't do it like stupidly just to put AI everywhere. And we'll never get, I think, to 100% automation and only using AI. But you can definitely automate a lot of like relatively simple and manual tasks that exist today.
And I think your point earlier was spot on in terms of there are significant advantages being a born in Gen AI business structure because you can approach things
Yeah,
from the start
definitely.
in a different way, where others have to go through that transformation. And no doubt you'll be doing much the same as we're doing in terms of the Futuria business, which is, yes, using large language models, but combining it with data science and machine learning and other things, because
Exactly.
you've got to work out how the facts are kind of being used, but use the large language model to interact and create reports and writing and things like that. So that's great to hear. So let's talk about ethics and responsibility a bit, because obviously every conversation around AI has to kind of talk about ethics and responsibility. It's a core part of the conversation in the podcast too. But of course, we've got an additional one here, which is because you're focused on ESG and enabling SMEs to produce reports. But of course, you're consuming energy through the use of AI in delivering those reports. So
Yeah.
what's your approach around ethics and responsibility?
So for me, ethics and responsibility, I kind of approach it on like for us, the AI as of today can only give suggestions, right? These are not the cold hard truth because we feel that the confidence level is not high enough to kind of take it for granted without any human check. So for me, you need to have some type of human checking of what the AI does. Um, Additionally, when you talk about kind of the use of AI, it's more from an environmental perspective, right? It's using electricity, it's using a lot of things. In our end, we're using it, I hope, for a good mission, which is to reduce the emissions of all of these other companies. We're kind of a fintech SaaS startup, so we're not the one with the highest kind of environmental footprint. Our only thing is really kind of electricity consumption and AI. On that hand, once again, we don't really have a power or an influence on AI consumption because these are not our own LLMs. I hope that one day we'll be able to build ours. This is a universal problem, right? How can we reduce kind of electricity and data consumption when using these large language models? So we're still grappling with it, right? We're still kind of questioning ourselves every day at Fingreen of how can we better ourselves because our whole thing is around bettering other small private companies. So we're doing the maximum. We're far from being perfect, and some things are just inherent to our business model, such as the use of AI. But we try to limit it as much as possible. And as I said, not to put it just everywhere, just to put AI.
I really like your point around the reason why you're using it, the impact that you're looking to make as an organization to effectively enable other organizations to improve that helps the planet improve. So I often talk about that balance between we need to innovate to use these technologies to have that positive impact. We can't just say, no, it's bad from the start because there are problems that need solving that are out there. Do you also find that that helps in recruitment? I mean, as you've grown across Europe and the work that you're delivering, what are you finding are the reasons why people join you, or the messages you put out in the market to attract people to your scaling business?
Yeah, listen, we've been super lucky on that front. In terms of recruitment, like we have a lot of people that want to join us. Some people actually help us for free, mainly because they believe in the mission, right? We're open source. We want to better kind of environmental impact of, as I said, 99% of all companies in the world. And we're building kind of in the open, right? And so it excites people, right? AI, ESG for me are the two most important topics of our century, the two most important challenges. And so, yeah, on recruitment, honestly, we've had way more people wanting to join us that we can recruit. Unfortunately, I hope we can recruit much more in the coming years. And just to get back to your first point, right? It's you can always like even the most environmentally conscious person has clothes that were built using oil, right? Is eating at one point food that comes from some kind of intensive agriculture. So it doesn't exist, right? The person who doesn't have any impact just by living, you actually have an impact. But how are you living? You know, what are you using your time for? Are you compensating more than yourself you are using? But yeah, sometimes some very extreme people kind of radically cut off all dialogue, right? Because And yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and it's especially for young people, right? A lot of people are getting more engaged and sometimes feel frustrated because it feels like whatever I do, I'm still gonna get bashed on by the most extreme person. And as I said, just by existing, you actually have a negative environmental impact.
And I've heard it from a range of different people. I mean, it can be quite disillusioning at times, but surely if we're helping organizations make a positive improvement, no matter how large that is or small that is, at least if it's in the right direction, then that's contributing to the change that we all need to make. Is there I had a conversation on the podcast. Well, I've had a number of conversations, and people have raised things like looking for explorers, looking for curiosity, looking for deep technical experience. What are the kind of skills that people bring that correlate to the work that you're doing? Because, and I think the reason I asked the question is for AI businesses.
Mhm.
Well, a lot of these things that we're doing are new. It's not as though there's people out there with vast amounts of years of
Yeah.
experience in generative AI, for example. So what are the skills that you're looking for that you're able to then translate to deliver the work that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a good point because we internally, so obviously we want to use AI a lot on our solution for our clients, but we also want to use it as much as possible internally, in sales, in marketing, even in coding, right? So we always want to use kind of the latest tools, and obviously we're big kind of believers in the transformative power of AI. So we're looking for people that kind of are not afraid to completely change the way they've been working to adopt new AI tools that are revolutionizing their specific area. Um, and this is quite hard to do because, as you said, this is a very, very new topic, and there's 10,000 new tools kind of popping up every time, all day. So yeah, I mean, it's a correct balance, but from what I've seen and the people that want to join us actually have some type of curiosity around AI and want to understand how they can use it also to improve their own productivity and their own work.
So let's touch on ambition. I mean, you've talked a bit about ambition as we've talked through the conversation anyway, but from both a personal point of view and the organization, what are the goals that you're looking to achieve as steps towards that ambition of impacting 99% of organizations out there?
Yeah, so if all non-listed companies can be onboarded on the Fingreen AI tool, that would be a big win. But more realistically, I think right now for us, it's really consolidating our space in Europe, because everything comes from Europe when it comes to ESG regulations, and the whole world kind of follows suit a lot of the time. Think about GDPR, a couple of years back, that now has been adopted with like 70, 80% overlap basically in all developed countries. I mean, not in all of them, but in all of them. And exactly the same thing is happening with ESG regulations. You look at all developed countries' financial regulators. In the past 12 months, they have announced some type of new ESG reporting obligations. And most of the time, there's a huge overlap on what the EU Commission and the EFRAG has published. So first, really getting better. Definitely getting better in Europe, and then kind of growing worldwide. Before we mentioned kind of the ISSB in the UK and Asia and Middle East, which is coming very strong. The US is a bit of a tougher situation. We'll see a little bit the new election, what it brings us. But yeah, I don't really have a limit in terms of ambition. Today, we're a super small company and we're fighting with limiting resources. But yeah, things like AI you can definitely have a huge, huge impact with a very small team.
Fantastic point. And I think to finish with, if you had one wish, so one wish this weekend to help accelerate that journey to achieve that ambition, what would it be?
It'd be to to have more devs in our team because our CTO has a lot of work and the rest of the team has a lot of work, and I feel bad for these guys sometimes because yeah, I mean, it's, right? It's a startup. Things are being broken, feedback and new products and improving what has been built. So yeah, definitely a little bit of help. And yeah, it's a question of resource and time. But that would be my wish. Otherwise, I feel like we're going into the right direction.
Fantastic. Look, it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you.